Okay, I think we're recording now. So, hello everybody. First off, I know my channel is mostly physics related and whatnot. And this is actually for a class I'm taking now. So this is specifically directed for my professor who's grading it. And this is just the easiest way I know how to upload material. But anyone can listen if you find this interesting. So I'm currently taking astrobiology right now, and we're going to do a little podcast talking about astrobiology. And when I say we, I'm also joined by my friend John, good friend of mine, really smart guy, engineer. But I think he's kind of new to astrobiology, and that's kind of the audience we were targeting, the general population. So I think John will be a smart guy, but a good representation of kind of the general public. So want to say hi, John?
Yeah, hey everyone, how we all doing? Just to kind of give you a quick background, kind of like what I did. I graduated just as an engineer, and I basically was a product design engineer and such. So hopefully I can put my 2 good cents in for this, and we have a good podcast.
For sure. So as for biology, what do you know about it, John?
I think that's kind of a general statement, but I always just think of the cosmos. I think of space. Think of outside. I think of extraterrestrial. Not a huge grasp on it, but I definitely, when we start getting into specifics, I know that I will be able to really hold my own on it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's a very interesting field, and anything doing with space is super interesting, or at least I think it is. And astrobiology is definitely very interesting, which is basically just a study of life um, outside of our planet. So very big field, and the field or the aspect of this field that we're going to talk about specifically is what's known as the Fermi paradox. So the Fermi paradox is basically this idea that there's no real clear evidence of life anywhere outside of our planet. There's environments where life could be. There's been a few false positives. We talked a little bit about those in this class. Meteor coming from Mars, and some people thought life was on it, but it was here for millions of years, so it easily could have been contaminated, as an example. But we really don't have any clear evidence of life outside of Earth, and not even intelligent life. But when you consider how old the universe is, so old, and we know we're not the only Earth-like planet out there. There's others. You would think that we would see some evidence of something, but it's just so empty. Everything looks natural. It looks like it's under no influence of any intelligence, really. It's pretty eerie thinking about it, like walking in a empty big room or something. You just feel like there should be something there. I don't know if you've ever felt that way before.
Absolutely. I mean, I love answering these type of questions because it's like, or talking about this type of thing because, like in this world, it's just too perfect, right? Like imagine being on a big flying rock where you rotate, and when you rotate you have a morning and night, right? And then when you wake up, right, that's when you basically are ready to work, and then the rest of the day you go back to bed, and it kind of transitions for that, and the idea of where the ball or your big rock sits in the middle of space, and if it navigates to one side, then we could instantly die because of some sort of huge cataclysmic issue. It's just it's too perfect, right? And now I'm excited to keep getting into this because this is exciting, and it's just interesting, right? It's something that I feel like it's just too perfect, right? It's almost like something that we as humans are not programmed to really believe, right? Because we always believe based on proof, and we've been searching for so long, and we have nothing to really back up for it. So yeah, so I'll let you keep kind of going on.
Well, you'd think there would be something out there, given how vast space is. Like, it seems pretty unlikely, I think, to the average person that there's just nothing out there. You would think there would be something. Like, what makes Earth so special compared to all the other planets out there? Wouldn't you
No,
agree with
absolutely.
that there? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, literally, absolutely. Like, and that's where I go back to the idea what we always talk about for probability. I mean, we do it with our numbers, we do it with letters. We there's certain things that we can actually use to, check for issues, like, for in an accountant, right? Like, he has certain strategies on doing it. Over here, we look at it as like, how is it possible that we could be in a, like, exactly like you were saying, a gigantic room that's blacked out, and we have absolutely no one else inside there but us.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, it reminds
it's so
me,
hard to believe.
I took circuits last semester, and you can kind of go into the lab whenever you want. And there were a few nights that me and my lab partner, when they're so late, like 2 in the morning, just working on a circuit. And the physics building is usually like populated. You kind of expect people to be around. But being in this, it's a pretty big building, like with no one else, it's kind of eerie. So it'd be kind of eerie to just know you're looking out into all the space and there's nothing. It's kind of an eerie feeling that we're not seeing anything. And that's going to
It's
be the
like
big
that.
thing for, for
Yeah, yeah, it's like that idea where you're like, you're out in the middle of the darkness, right? And you're outside somewhere and you're walking home alone, and there's just that feeling like as if someone's staring at us. And it reminds me of the same idea with the Earth, right? We're just kind of sitting there like a big beacon, and it almost kind of seems like there's no way possible that someone isn't just sitting there just talking about us, or just doesn't see us at all, right? It's like,
yeah.
we're, especially since we try sending out things. I mean, if you look right, satellites that go around our atmosphere, right? Like, geez, like, like I said, like a beacon to us.
Well, and part of it because, okay, on one hand, the universe is so big, you certainly think there's life out there somewhere, but that also could be why we're not actually seeing life. And that's one of the solutions to the Fermi paradox, is just that star systems are so far away that, some of the light we're seeing from these stars left billions of years ago, right? These these aren't nearby. It's not like you can hop in the car and or hop in a rocket ship, I guess, and be there in a couple months. Some of these would take many, many human lifespans to reach these star systems. So it kind of makes sense why you wouldn't see people or see any other civilization if we're that far away. It's just not really feasible. We're limited to the speed of light. We can't go faster than the speed of light. That would require infinite energy. So being that we're so far away, it kind of makes sense that we're not at least uh, directly seeing any evidence of um, life elsewhere, just because of how far away everything is. The astronomical units are just so huge.
No, no, absolutely agree with you. No, no, that's the part that kind of scares me, because it's hard to still believe that, right? Like, think about that. I want you to be able to just visualize, close your eyes, and think about this. You're trying to tell me right now that I'm on this ball, right? I'm thinking it's absolutely gigantic, but like, in some, actually, if you compare it to some stars or some planets nearby, right? I mean, they're just astronomically bigger than us. Like
Yeah.
Jupiter is, so now you come up to that idea, and then you go, wait a minute, like, now how far, it's hard to really be able to understand. It's like, when someone tries to ask, what's $1 million, right? And you come inside there and go, well, can I put it in my pocket? Can I have a whole bag of it? It's that same idea that I use an emphasis to really go, well, how big is
Yeah.
this actual,
It's even bigger
galaxies and
than that.
galaxies? Yeah, it's crazy, right? Like, just to think like that, it's that's what really is hard to wrap my mind around, because I've never seen something so big before, right? Like,
Yeah.
or so long, or it's
Pretty
hard to really.
overwhelming.
Yeah, 100%. That's why it's almost like, the amount of work we have to do to figure this stuff out is like, it almost kind of seems like impossible at certain instances, right? Where it makes sense why we only stick to really, like, our local planets, like, Mars is being one of them, because it's the closest thing that could, actually have life on Earth, like, just like us. So no, I completely agree. It's just, it's hard to wrap my mind around it and go, wow, like, our galaxy, we're inside one galaxy in this Milky Way, and that Milky Way is, there could be, thousands and trillions more. It's like, wow, it's hard to believe it.
And when you think about it, like if we knew life existed on maybe a planet 100,000 light years away, for example, there's nothing we could do right now to really study that life. I mean, I guess we could try to do a few things, but like we're not going to be able to see it. We're not going to be able to really do a whole lot with it. So even if we knew there was life out there, thousands of light years away, we can't, I mean, you think about the imaging, which is so heavily dependent on light and how optics work. It would take so long just for that light to come back for us to um, relay that information. It would be so old at that point, thousands of years possibly, depending how far it is. So it just makes it very difficult given the sheer distance. I mean, I don't know. I think this is a pretty valid solution to the Fermi paradox. I think there's a combination, but I think 100% this plays a role in it. What do you think?
No, yeah, yeah. It's funny because just kind of like how you were saying, from one planet to another, even if we knew that we could see each other from each other, the part that always makes me nervous is obviously Earth develops languages, right? These languages are not going to be able to just randomly be universal towards the
Right.
universes. So, say you do come over there and say you have a hostile planet far away, and you go ahead and you try to develop some sort of a communication towards them, but they don't reciprocate the same way that you may. So, instead of it, they may take it as a defense, and then maybe their technology is a lot more advanced than ours, and we are, that's something that kind of runs into my brain where I go, oh man, like
That's what
it'd be
Stephen
kind of even
Hawking was
scary.
afraid of. Stephen Hawking was opposed to actually sending messages out looking for life elsewhere, because more than likely that civilization is going to be more advanced than us. And I mean, if they decided to do something and they're just millions of years more advanced than us, there's nothing we could really do about it. Um, but yeah, no, I think the distances between these celestial objects being so great, I think that's definitely a huge factor. You look at I can't remember the name of the probe that passed Pluto, and I think it's actually left our solar system now. Um, I don't remember the name
I
of it, but I think that flew out in like the 70s or something, right?
Yes, 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 you're right. I was like,
So
I don't remember the name, but I do know what you're talking about.
yeah, and I think they had like I think we even talked about it, but I don't remember it off the top of my head the name. But the I mean, think how long that took. That's not something that happened overnight. The people working on that. Some of the people that worked on that project are dead. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
that's quite a big investment that you'd have to at least convince us. Obviously, we don't know the lifespan of like a hypothetical alien race. Maybe they live longer than us. But if we just use the human lifespan as a comparison, it's pretty hard to do that. So I think the distance from the stars is a pretty valid point made.
No,
Um,
yeah, and then you kind of explaining a little bit more into, right? Like, some of these, I know that we talk about sometimes as a unit for speed is light years, right? Like, think about that, right? We already know now by mathematically making a formula that you can never reach the speed of light. Well, sometimes, right, the speed of light could be, a ridiculous amount, right? You could have like, you from one place to another is it's almost impossible to make. It's just similar to like you were saying with like, you as a human being able to be dead already in our lifespan. Like there's no possible way we'd make it, and even if we could, right, like it's still so significantly far away that it's not even worth it in that way. So it's like, we have to figure out some sort of an alternative to actually develop, whether it's going to be some crazy sophisticated, either we have our brand new material or something that we actually figure out that is able to be used to develop this, or like they use examples like in movies where they see like some sort of like a brand new like ship, and the ship had fallen down onto Earth, and they take that material that that we can't have here on the Earth, and they try to redevelop it into something else. And that kind of reminds me of that same idea where it's like, it almost kind of seems like we need like that help to be thrown in there for us to be able to answer some of these questions
that's
that I feel
because
like
we're
we're
so
nowhere
far
near.
behind on it. It's not something that
Absolutely.
happens overnight. It takes thousands of years before we, make the type of progress we'd really need to. And the next one I want to talk about is, while we're pretty interested in the idea of if there's life, um, there's also the possibility that there is life out there, but they're not interested in us. And I don't know. I personally, maybe because I'm biased and I'm a human, and as a human, I'm curious. I don't find this is a very good solution, just because it's probably, I mean, there is some human bias here, but I would think that if we found some sort of life elsewhere, even if we've already discovered life before, let's say we find life in on Europa or something like that, or the moon of Titan, we would still be interested if we found life elsewhere. Like that's a huge scientific discovery. We would want to research it. We'd want to know more about it. That would be huge. So I find it hard to believe like a civilization based on like science wouldn't take the opportunity to be like, oh wow, there's actually decently advanced life on this planet. That would be really cool if we could learn more about them and understand them. But this solution is basically saying they don't care. Um, it's like if you pass by a ant on the road, like you're not really interested in the ant. You're just so far beyond them that who cares? But I don't know. We see ants all the time, right? We don't see life all the time. So I'm not sure if I agree with this one, but what do you think?
Yeah, like I mean, I like to play the devil advocate on this, right? Like, think about it like this also, right? So, what if, you know, just like like we always explain ourselves that humans are the smartest animals, right? When you compare it to them, what if they're able to also kind of reciprocate that same emotion that Stephen Hawking was talking about, where they may also be kind of nervous on trying to do something like this, right? Like I have heard several times before, you never know actually how it is, but sometimes they're actual big officials, and I won't go too much into it, but like you'll hear about these big like Air Force driving these big jets, and they hear something or they see something crazy that's absolutely unexplainable, right? The first thing, our first instinct was to kill, right? Because we related it back to either Russia or to China for someone who has a higher technology than us, and we may consider them as a threat. So instead of us, they could have been there just to see how we were, and then they kind of instantly saw that we were trying to kill, and they kind of like, oh man, they reciprocated as, why would we try to go back over there when they're just going to want to hurt us, right? And you never know, right? Like I mean, like I said, it doesn't make that. I feel like it doesn't really make too much sense at times, but I think there is a high chance that something like that could be thought out. What do you think about that?
That sounds kind of like the dark forest theory. Now, that's another solution that I guess we can talk about since it was brought up, that there are other civilizations out there, but they're basically afraid of being attacked by other civilizations. So because of that, they're basically hiding, they're kind of preventing themselves from being seen. They're not sending messages out there into space hoping to find something. They're trying not to be heard. They're trying to blend in or hide, not be seen. Um, so that's kind of like I feel like that's starting to talk a little bit about the dark forest, that they're afraid of a aggressive civilization that might do them harm. Um, that they don't want to communicate with or associate with. And I think
Yeah,
that's a little bit more believable than just them not interested. But I think they would still be interested. They would just say like, well, yeah, we're interested, but if we go there, they're going to like possibly shoot us down or something, and it's just not worth it. So we're not going to do it. It's kind of like we're very interested in sharks, right? We want to study sharks, but we're not going to just swim in there with no protection to observe sharks up close because they'll bite us, you know?
I mean, yeah, and I think it kind of reminds me of like you kind of compare it towards like when you do a deal between someone to another, right? It's kind of a mutual, right? You kind of go between each other, you make a phone call, go, hey, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and buy your vehicle, right? The guy comes with the money, you guys meet up at a certain spot, right? Then it kind of makes mutual. But right when we shoot out radio waves to go ahead and try to see if we can get a some sort of a response back, that doesn't mean they're using radio waves, right? They may be also trying to relate something back to us. Instead, they said, you know what, let's just go straight over towards that side, and then they get some sort of a negative feedback. It kind of makes sense to me why you would feel a little nervous on wanting to get a little bit closer for someone who may actually still, like I said, yeah, hurt you or such.
Yeah, exactly. So they're not interested in us theory. I don't really subscribe to too hard. But the dark forest, I think, is possible. The only issue I have with the dark forest theory is I could understand like a few civilizations, maybe even half of them doing that. But you're trying to tell me there's not some, I mean, they're not probably all in communications or cahoots with each other. Why wouldn't one of them, you know, decide they're going to be the explorers? You would think at least one civilization or some civilization would. Um, so I don't know. That's the one critique I have of the dark force theory, is it's just applying it to every single possible civilization that could be out there. And I mean, that would, maybe that plays a role. Maybe there is a civilization out there and they don't want to be seen. So that's why we're not seeing them. But like I said in the beginning, I really think that there's not one solution to this. I think it's a combination of different ideas that have been proposed. And maybe that's part of it.
No, absolutely. And I think that that's where sometimes, like, and I feel like that kind of also relates to the solutions that we find out in, in just general, world where, you may find something and, it seems like it's kind of a slap in the face, right? And we see it and do it all day. Like I talk about, like the idea of even gravity, right? And you go, well, you don't really understand what it is, and you can't really understand it, but it's something that happens all the time, and so we use that finally to relate it. I think that it goes back to this where you compare certain things where you see like some sort of like a distance, and these distances obviously are dramatically farther than we can really expect. And I think that that also kind of stems back to the idea of why we don't see anything. And then also maybe say we did find something. The hard part to me is to believe that we don't have, if there is someone there and they're avoiding us, that we haven't already seen them or really noticed like some sort of like a some sort of like an actual like picture that I could see and go, oh, they're over there. But that's the hard part to me, that I go, well, how could you possibly find us randomly out of absolutely nowhere?
Yeah.
They may have their own strategies, but that's something that kind of like, wow, that's kind of hard
Kind
to
of like a
relate.
needle in a haystack, but like even
Exactly.
close.
Literally exactly. Especially if we're struggling to find people. And I would say, I'm not trying to say we are, we're relatively like, pretty advanced still in general compared to what we have on Earth, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
compared to anything else we try to compare animals towards, right? I mean, and again, like I said, no, not much can be actually compared when you compare to like extraterrestrial, because we don't really know, but I can go ahead and compare based on what we know and what we see, you know.
Yeah, and that's the unfortunate part of like the search for SETI and whatnot, that we're basing all of our information off of us. But there's no reason that that life evolved like we did, that they're necessarily like us. They could have done stuff completely differently, you know. So sure, we use radio waves a lot, and that seems kind of simple to us, but maybe for a different civilization, that's not the way they go. Maybe they evolve differently and how they communicate is different. So maybe radio signals isn't the best way to communicate with a possible civilization out there. So those are all possibilities. I want to talk a little bit about, I think we'll have some more fun ones at the end here, but I want to talk a little bit about the next few that are, I don't know, I feel like I could relate some of this back to my class. These are kind of fun ones that I found interesting, but there's also some solutions that I think I can kind of tie back to what we've been learning in class. So the first one is basically the idea of a great filter. So a great filter, if you don't know, is basically the idea that there's this wall that life inevitably hits that often leads to its demise. And there could be many. There could be many. So an example might be, all right, we're evolving, we're becoming more intelligent, but we become so intelligent, we learn how to split the atom, and now we have nuclear weapons. That takes a pretty good amount of intelligence to be able to do that. But at the same time, you're also kind of opening a can of worms, and now you're leaving yourself open to the possibility of nuclear annihilation. And maybe that's common in civilizations. Maybe they develop, and to a certain extent, life has to be aggressive. Life, tends to thrive off of the back of other life. They have to eat other life forms. So they have to evolve to be somewhat aggressive. They can't just sit in the corner and evolve and become intelligent. They have to kind of take from other organisms. So you have these life that have evolved to be somewhat aggressive, and now they know how to split the atom. well, that might destroy your whole civilization. There's other things as well, like obviously, if you have life on your Earth and it's evolving, you probably have bacteria and viruses. What effect could that have on your population? Or even the fact that we evolved to have intelligence. Why? Maybe that's a bit of a filter to have a civilization. Is intelligence really always the most fitting thing to have in nature? You can be very smart, but you throw Einstein in the ocean with the great white, it's not really going to matter that he's very smart. The shark's just going to eat him. So there's a lot of great filters that could, or a lot of possible great filters that could prevent life from ever really getting going. Maybe life never really moves past the microbe state because there's just a filter there. So there's a lot, and we can talk about the different types of filters, but the idea is as life evolves, it's just naturally going to hit certain walls, and those walls could lead to the end of that life, the destruction of their civilization, their extinction. And because of that, all life ends up kind of dying. And that has some pretty crazy consequences that I'll talk a little bit about, but I didn't know if you wanted to add anything, John.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's like kind of like the nature of greed, and like I said, a lot of the stuff I'm going to compare to is stuff that we know, here in the actual Earth wise, right? So, I mean, you think about it right now, right? I mean, we navigate ourselves. Everyone is trying to always be the best, right? No matter what you say, the U.S. is always trying to be on top of one country to another country. So, like, oh, you compare over towards Russia, right? Well, Russia is also a heavy hitter. China is also a heavy hitter. So, there are certain times where I think that it gets hostile, and someone tries to basically be on top, and it results in them trying to, force their guns. And it's just going to take one of these times for one of them to go off, and these major bombs go off, and it wipes out the whole planet on its own, right? And I think that that's where I think, honestly, I could see that being very possible, right? I mean, it only takes one bad egg to really try to manipulate people into into really thinking that they're the real reason or the right reason to go do things. And I think that that's where, it's not a far-fetched hypothesis or idea about how this actually gets ran through, because it happens in us in nature, right? I mean, I don't know if that's just the nature of humans or the nature of, whatever, if you want to compare it to, extraterrestrial or whatever it is, but it's not a far-fetched idea. Like I can definitely see that. And we see it a lot all the time. I mean, you have one guy or one person or, a bunch of people come over there and they try taking over. They're tired of the what's being told what to do, and they want to basically be able to do what they want. And so, these high tech, I've heard of, 15, 13-year-olds create bombs, right? You don't have to be too smart to do them. You do have to get certain materials, but even if you makeshift them, right, it's crazy what you can do. And I think that that is a definitely a fair answer, especially right now. Again, like I said, it's kind of hostile when we go back to history, right? And we compared to the Cold War, right? I mean, we were all stuck between basically who's going to use their gun first, right? Who's going to shoot?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's an interesting idea.
Well, and especially with the Cold War, we came very close to complete nuclear annihilation on multiple occasions. There was one instance, I think it had to do with like the light reflecting off the atmosphere, and it triggered like the Soviet warning that, hey, United States just sent missiles our way. And the protocol was to send missiles back, but the officer in charge thought it didn't make sense that there would only be a few nukes we would send. We would just send everything. So he completely disobeyed orders and said, no, stand down. This probably is just not functioning. And of course it was. But just imagine if, alternative reality where you had a guy that was just very by the books, and the Soviets shoot their missile. The United States is going to figure that out. They're going to shoot theirs back. That could have had who knows what type of destruction on life on Earth. It would at least set us back, quite a while. So stuff like that, we've come very close to doing at least quite a bit of damage, if not flat out destroy all of the people on Earth. So it's been very close. And there's actually a quote, I think it's by Einstein, who said something along the lines, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, I don't know what weapons will be used in World War III, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. So we'll have
Yeah,
like
and
this
that
really
was from
advanced technology, but we're going to use it to destroy ourselves and basically blast ourselves back to the Stone Ages. So that's a possibility. Maybe other life is like that. Maybe other civilizations get aggressive, and maybe they're not as lucky as we've been so far, and somebody pushes the big red button.
Oh yeah, it only takes one time, right? And the bad part and the scary part is, right, like just similar to like what you were saying a second ago, right? You're not going to just put one out, right? Because then what's the point of having all the others? The whole point is you put them all out at the same time, right? Because it effectively will create more damage and more distance, and will actually create more of a statement, right? But no one comes over there and throws only one bomb and then goes, you know what? Let's just stop now. It's like, no, they throw one bomb and they throw them all. And imagine what. Not only that, let's just say the example of after it does. So say millions of people die, and then after that, with the radiation that would take over the Earth and destroy it. But no, yeah. Anyways, let's going back on topic towards like more of like extraterrestrial and these ideas. It's super possible, because I mean it doesn't even have to be, honestly, that these people basically grow into being very bright and smart, and then developing all these ideas and then doing it themselves. It could be also just similar to like how we were talking about before, where some sort of like a meteor, something out of their mind that they could have never expected come by and just wipe them all out. And right, we don't know what the time frame is of this, right? This could have been, these galaxies and galaxies could have been here for billions and trillions of years, right? So we have no idea. They probably were. I mean, like, I do, if you want to even kind of talk about this, I do know that we did see moisture on Mars. It does. There are hinters, and I feel like sometimes it is a slap in the face for how we should be thinking about it. But sometimes, the most obvious sometimes isn't that obvious.
We actually talked about that in a very recent module, and there is actually, I think it's in the poles of Mars, she said, that we have water. So that is something we've actually covered, and that's a thing. But kind of getting back to the great filter idea, it doesn't have to be nuclear wars. That's a common one that people think that might be a great filter. It could be maybe you learn how to harness fossil fuels for energy, but then maybe you kind of tear up your environment in the process and it becomes kind of difficult to maintain life. Maybe there's a great filter with how our information with like RNA and DNA, how it replicates. Maybe that's a great filter. Maybe it could be a whole number of things. There's so many things that have to go right. And the idea that that there's some sort of filter preventing life from going somewhere is pretty interesting, because, well, what is the great filter? Are we past the great filter? Did we make it past? If so, that's good. But what if the great filter is ahead of us? What if there's new technology that we haven't figured out because we're not smart enough? But once we do figure it out, it could have terrible damage to the human race. Maybe there's some sort of AI technology that naturally, as intelligent life evolves, they start working towards AI. Maybe that's a bad idea. I don't know. But that's kind of interesting. It's interesting. I do believe we will find life eventually. And I suspect we'll find a lot of microbes. But to me, what that implies is that there might be a great filter early on in the development of life. And that's hopefully the case, because then we're okay. But there could be a great filter ahead of us. And mankind will be tested once it gets there, if we will be able to survive that great filter, a filter that's maybe put thousands of other civilizations extinct in the history books. That could be in front of us. And that's kind of terrifying to think about.
No, honestly, I think we're just getting started. I think we're in a pinnacle stage where, right, when you think about like just things in general, right now we're looking for alternative resources and we're going towards electric cars, right? And we're getting out of gas cars, and we're talking about flying vehicles, and we're talking about, just like we were speaking about, AI, or any of these kind of different like perspectives, right? And what their ultimate goals, and all these rocket ships that are being made, and now they made a 3D printer for one, and all these different things that are starting to really come up. And I think that this is where everything starts to change. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen that one game or the one movie movie. I forget what it's called. I think it's called like Gamer or something. And
I know what you're
similar to,
talking
kind
about.
of the idea of it is, the person puts on this headset and it basically submerges them like as if they're in the game. And the crazy
Right.
part is it kind of reminds me of like, when humans in general, right? You a lot of the time you look for positive and you want to be always happy, right? So you find alternatives to doing it. Now there are like, there's virtual reality, certain things where it takes you to, Hawaii, and you're still at your home, obviously sitting inside your chair, but it gives you that visual, and the people get stuck on it because they just want it to be there all day, every day. And it definitely is something that I definitely can see in the future where an AI comes and starts to we try to develop the same idea as iRobot, literally. Like that's probably one of the best examples, right? Where they try to develop their own we try to develop their own mind to be able to think of alternative solutions, but their mind starts to wander just like how humans do, and they get different motives. Now their motive is, well, I don't like you telling me what to do. Back then, right now is, you try telling someone to do, it's not a good look for it and such, and they go, you know what, actually I'm gonna be telling you what to do, right? And then it starts to change in where they don't get sensory, right? It's not like I'm gonna go shoot him and then there's gonna be some sort of a hurt. It's gonna be more of now them kind of fighting back at that situation, right? And I think that's where something kind of gets a little nerve wracking for the background of where we're gonna go.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely possibles in front of us, but there's been a lot of factors that have happened already that I think are pretty crazy. Even the fact that intelligence was something that natural selection selected, right? That I'm not sure if maybe obviously people much smarter than me have figured this out, but why is it beneficial to be intelligent, at least early on? I can see now how we can manipulate our environment and it's beneficial, but why would that help the cavemen that they were smarter and they could start a fire if there was a woolly man? I don't even know if woolly mammoths were around back then, but a giant animal that would just literally eat them, like swallow them whole. Why did being intelligent, why was that something that was selected? How did that benefit them and help them reproduce? So that was something I've always interested in. I don't
Yeah.
recall us talking about that, but that seems kind of like a filter to me. Why is that beneficial? It's kind of like if you threw Einstein in the water with the shark, it doesn't matter if he's smart, the shark's going to win. So what's the
Yeah.
point in intelligence
I,
being something selected?
I like where you're going with this because I think that this is where we think of the idea of like a human life in general, right? Before you can walk, you have to be able to crawl, right? And I think that it's a very slow process, and I don't think it's I think it's more of the idea of what they can basically contribute to that day and how that day can kind of pick up from where they left off. And it's kind of like a recycling idea that they get better and better. It's like the same idea right now, right? You go ahead and we buy a car. Okay, it's brand new, 2022. But in 2030, it's not a brand new car anymore. It actually kind of sucks and it doesn't work. I think the idea of it is back then it was fantastic, right? I used to always hear all the time, and my dad go, "Oh well," I go, "Dad, that car's a piece of crap." He goes, "Well, back then that was the nicest car you could possibly buy." And I think that that's where things kind of like stem. It's more of not whether it's intelligence basically is during that time, or sorry, for certain instances. It almost kind of seems like also like they have a role, right? Like, there are some people in this world that are going to be really bright and contribute in their own, intellectually. Another one may be that they are really good hands-on with building and supplies. And I think that these are extra little, like I said, roles that kind of stem and help us basically attribute some small, but could be some sort of a piece. And then they do have some people, right? Like, shining stars that everyone knows about, Albert Einstein, Newton, any of these people who developed something so ridiculous that they were able to use stepping stones from other people to really get to the answer,
Yeah.
you know?
And definitely like as we kind of got the ball rolling and we're able to like build shelters and weapons, I see how we got the upper hand on like everything else. But what kind of confuses me still, and I don't know, maybe my professor knows better than this, is why was that originally? What environmental factors led to that being a selection made? Um, I don't know. That's just a question. I've had that for a while, and maybe they kind of have an idea, but that might not always be the case. That might be a filter that prevents life from going beyond dinosaurs, right? Maybe they stay as cavemen or dinosaurs. Because think about how much life has gone extinct here on Earth. Almost all of it that's ever existed has gone extinct. I think it's like 98, 99%. Why were we that 1% that hasn't gone extinct? Because I don't think I would have bet on like our ancestors to make it, considering all the stuff that was going on out there, even though they were more intelligent. So I don't know. That was something I've always been interested in, is why nature selected intelligence for us, why that happened. Why did we not go extinct? I felt like we should have, given that there were much more, because when we talk about natural selection and survival of the fittest, it's the ones best fit to survive and reproduce in that environment. I just find it hard to believe like we were that. So that's another filter. It doesn't have to be necessarily nuclear war. It could be something in our evolutionary history on, well, nature selected this for us. Is that going to be what's selected for organisms elsewhere? That's another possible filter, in my opinion.
No, no, and like I said, that's an absolute fair point, right? I mean, we used to consider people that we thought were, not looking or didn't they weren't normal, they were a witch, or they did something, we stoned people to death. So absolutely, that's a fair argument. I think the point, like, going back to it is like, like I said before, it's kind of like, you have to be able to crawl before you walk, right? And there are a lot of instances where, we kind of, I think there's a, like, kind of like similar to like right now, what we're doing, right? You ask all these questions, and there's a lot of people that then go, that is a good question. Why exactly do we have to, why do we do what we do? And I think that that's where things start to stem around the idea of kind of like what Earth is and how it basically, why we care what we do. And I think that, there are some people who ask those questions, and there's some people who can figure those questions out. But I think, like, when you have the people who can ask the right questions, you can get the right answers from in the long run, right? Because then we consider it for over a long time, right? Because a lot of these answers, none of them are quick, right? Like, we bring up the idea right now of mathematics, right? You and me have been in, and probably most of everyone going to be listening, have been in high mathematics, whether it's a calculus class, calculus 2, all these differential equations. But differential equations, the amount of knowledge we know from differential equations is so minuscule. It's almost next to none, right? We know how to do set up questions that we know in the perfect instances. And I think that it's just going to cause us to do time, and I think time is basically going to be the answer for all this, because it's just going to take that right person, right? How many times have you heard of, Albert Einstein or a Newton coming around? Not many. And I think it's just going to take us one century or one era for us to have that one person again who's really going to be able to show off and go ask the right questions and be able to really think of it in that perspective.
Yeah, definitely. So those are just some of the possible solutions. There's a lot. There's some other kind of fun ones like simulation theory and the idea that aliens have kind of mastered VR, so they don't want to leave their home planet. I don't know if I can really tie those into what we've learned in class at all.
Yeah, that's a
I've kind
little
of
far
tried,
fetched.
yeah, I've kind of tried to do that, at least with some of these, with different things I remember learning in the slides. But yeah, these are a few possible solutions to the Fermi paradox. I don't know, which one do you believe the most?
Honestly, I think it's just gonna be distance. I think that, like I said, I think it's too perfect. I think everything is too perfect for us to come back and say, you know what, we're on a flying rock in the middle of space, and there's a gigantic, a galaxy, and we're inside this Milky Way, and this Milky Way there's billions of Milky Ways all around the world. I think that honestly, we just haven't found it. Like, I think we are just too perfect where we're at. I think that everything is just not. It doesn't, not everything seems to be, makes sense to me. Like I said, a lot of it sometimes seems like a slap in the face, right? Something that we should know. And, some things that seem so obvious may not be so obvious, right? Like, I think that we are so far away from one place to another, and it shows, right? We look out into space right now, right? Where's the closest planet to us? It's not close, right? And close is a relative term, right? Close isn't you're going around the corner to the grocery store. Closest to there is like, you're leaving planet and going to the farthest place, like, 1,000 times, right? So I think that that's where things get kind of like, lost in the galaxy, where, we are just so far from each other. Because, like, again, like, I mean, this could.
Sorry about that. The audio cut out there for a moment. But yeah, that was the Fermi paradox. The kind of question on why we're not seeing any evidence of life anywhere that we look. So there's quite a few, and they're all very interesting. I try to tie some of them back to what we've learned in class, but you have any final thoughts you want to share, John?
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think it's just really, it's going to be one place to another is going to be what really holds us back. Actually, I didn't hear what to say what your final thought was. Is what do you think is the big reason, or big hypothesis seems the most right to you?
A big, great filter guy. Just because we've come so close to like nuclear war before that if we reran it again, it could definitely happen. So, and I think life has to be somewhat aggressive to evolve. So I think life just kind of ends up dying before it can reach a point of intelligence that it can be seen or noticed from an observer. And I think a lot of these kind of play a role. I do think the fact that the universe is so big plays a role, and all that sort of stuff. But I'm a big great filter guy. I think that's the most interesting, and I think that's probably the solution to most of the paradox.
Perfect. Yeah. No, I don't disagree with you. I absolutely think that, especially right now, since we've seen something so similar to us happen, couldn't say anything more. I agree.
Yeah. So for everyone else, I'll get back to normal video posting. I know I haven't posted in a while, but that's because of school. And hopefully I'll be able to get back to that. And I don't know if you guys like this, maybe we could do more of it. I thought it was fun. I enjoyed it. It's fun researching, fun talking about. So maybe that's something
No,
we can do again in the future.
yeah, I want to say thank you for having me on, and I absolutely enjoy talking about just things that you don't normally think about.
For sure, for sure. All right. Well, it's been fun, but I'm going to end it here. So thank you guys.